Mom, why is everyone staring at us like that? My daughter's voice sliced through the thick, unnerving silence that had fallen over the backyard. I squeezed her small hand gently as we moved forward, my other hand clutching tightly onto one of my sons. Behind me, our nanny followed with my fourth child. Every pair of eyes in the crowd was on us, burning into my skin with judgment and curiosity. The lavish baby shower was held in the backyard of Julian's mansion, a sprawling estate that I'd once thought would be our home forever. And yet, here I was, walking through the crowd with 4 children, none of whom Julian had ever known existed. Across the perfectly manicured lawn, Julian stood beside a table laden with gifts wrapped in yellow and white, the very gifts that now seemed so irrelevant in the face of what I was about to reveal. His face had gone white, his eyes wide with a kind of shock I'd never seen before. The man who had once told me I was barren, the man who'd walked away, leaving me shattered, now stood frozen as his world crumbled around him. I could almost hear his thoughts. Did I really just see what I think I saw? These children, his legacy, had just walked into his life. And the look on his face? That was priceless. It was a mixture of disbelief and pure horror. You know, people often think revenge requires a plan. Some think it's all about the quiet scheming, the late-night plotting, or the emotional games. But I've learned that sometimes the best form of revenge is as simple as showing up, living your truth in front of someone who once tried to break you, just standing there while they choke on their own lies. It's about owning the moment, owning yourself. I know some of you are wondering why I would go this far. Trust me, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, if you've ever been cast aside by someone you loved, if you've ever been forced to fight for your dignity, you'll understand. And if you're still wondering why I'm here today, well, just hold on. We're about to dive into a story that will make you see things in a whole new light. But first, before we dive in, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this story. Share it with anyone who needs to hear it, because this is about showing up, even when they've tried to bury you, and proving that the ones who try to destroy you don't get to write your ending. You do. Let me take you back to the beginning. Because you need to understand how I went from being the woman Julian discarded to standing in front of him at his baby shower, holding 4 children he never thought would exist. And it all started years before this moment. I was 23 when I met Julian. At that age, you believe in forever, don't you? You think love conquers everything, no matter how hard the world may try to break you down. I was young, so damn hopeful about the future. I thought that when you loved someone enough, when you gave them all you had, they'd treasure it. They'd treasure you. Julian was 26, already working at his father's real estate firm, a handsome, charming man who came from wealth and privilege. I was finishing my nursing degree, working night shifts at the hospital to pay for tuition because my parents had died in a car accident when I was 19. I didn't have a family to fall back on, no safety net, just me, my dreams, and a determination to rebuild my life from the wreckage of loss. He pursued me like I was the only woman in the world. I still remember how he used to bring me coffee during my breaks, leaving little notes that made me smile. He'd show up at my apartment after my overnight shifts with breakfast, telling me I was beautiful, even when I was exhausted and still in my scrubs. His charm was irresistible, and I wanted to believe in it. 6 months later, Julian proposed. His family didn't approve. They thought I was too ordinary, too lowly for their son. But Julian told me he didn't care. He said I was worth more than all their wealth and status combined. I believed him. I married him in a small ceremony, his mother barely in attendance, and his father skipping the whole thing. But Julian's younger sister, Michelle, was the only one who seemed happy for us. She said I brought something real into the family. At the time, I thought that was enough. I believed that love could overcome everything. But that belief shattered when Julian's true colors started to show. The longer we were married, the more distant he became. He wanted children, and I desperately wanted to give him that. But after several failed IVF attempts, it became clear that I couldn't. To Julian, it was a betrayal. To him, I wasn't enough. His harsh words rang in my ears. I need a real family. I need children. You can't even give me that. And just like that, I became worthless in his eyes. I wasn't enough. I wasn't the wife he had hoped for. So, he left. It was over. I was discarded, pushed aside like an old, useless toy, left to pick up the pieces of my life alone. But what Julian didn't know was that life had other plans for me. 6 months after the divorce, I discovered something that would change everything. I was pregnant. Not with one child, but with 4. My quadruplets were a miracle I hadn't dared to hope for, and they were everything Julian had told me I couldn't have. 4 little lives that would forever tie me to him. But they were mine now. No one could take them away. And when I found out, I made a decision. I wouldn't let Julian get away with the lies. I wouldn't let him think he could erase me or our children from his life so easily. So, when I received the invitation to his baby shower, the one meant to mock me, I decided I would show up. I would show him what he never expected, what he never thought he would see. My children. His children. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming everything he had stolen from me. My confidence, my dignity, my sense of self-worth. And when I walked into that baby shower with my quadruplets in tow, Julian would have no choice but to face the truth he had denied for so long. Let's go back to that moment. The moment when everything changed. But before we see how everything changed, tell me where you're watching from. Now, hit that subscribe button and let's dive in. It's funny how life works out. How you can spend years believing in one version of yourself, one version of your future, and then one small moment, one event, can shatter all of that, leaving you standing in the rubble of your former expectations. I was once a woman who believed in love above all else. I thought that if I loved enough, if I gave enough, that everything would eventually work out. But love wasn't the only thing that mattered. I first met Julian when I was 23. I was full of hope and dreams, fresh out of nursing school, with nothing but ambition and a desire to make something of myself. He was everything I thought I wanted: handsome, confident, driven. He was the perfect man to fill my life with everything I thought I lacked: security, stability, the promise of a future. Julian's pursuit of me was relentless. He wasn't just charming, he was magnetic. He paid attention to details no one else noticed. Flowers at my nurse's station, coffee delivered with handwritten notes during my breaks, breakfast at my apartment after long, exhausting shifts. He made me feel special in ways I had never felt before. 6 months after we met, he proposed. At the time, I thought it was the culmination of everything I had hoped for. It was supposed to be the beginning of a fairy tale. I didn't know then that I was walking into a nightmare. The first few years of our marriage were blissful in their own way. But slowly, Julian began to change. I could feel the distance growing between us, like an invisible wall that separated us more with each passing day. We both had jobs, but my work at the hospital was all-consuming. I was often on call, working night shifts, sometimes missing meals and sleep. Julian's work was no less demanding, yet instead of pulling together, we grew apart. I was giving him everything: my love, my devotion, my body. But it was never enough. It wasn't long before I began to sense that my inability to get pregnant had become a problem for him. At first, he was supportive, encouraging, even hopeful that we would eventually have children. But as the years dragged on, the hope faded from his eyes. I'll never forget the day he finally said it. "I need a real family, Sophia. I need children. You can't even give me that." Those words hung in the air like poison, slicing through my heart. It wasn't the first time we had talked about children. We'd tried for years, going through IVF, countless medical procedures, and sleepless nights. But nothing ever worked. He couldn't understand why. I couldn't either. It broke me in ways I couldn't explain, and it broke him too. The man I had once seen as my protector had become my tormentor. It wasn't just the lack of children that pushed him away. It was the constant disappointment in my eyes, the lingering sadness that he couldn't fix. His patience wore thin, and with every failed IVF attempt, he seemed to withdraw further into himself. He began to spend more time away from home, work trips, late nights, random weekends with friends. I'd sit alone in our empty house, waiting for him to come back, hoping that when he did, it would be with the same love he had shown me when we were first married. But it never came. In the end, I wasn't enough for him. The man I had loved, the man who had promised me forever, chose to walk away. He left me with nothing but empty promises and a deep sense of failure. I'd failed him, I thought. I'd failed myself. After the divorce, I didn't know where to start. I had spent so many years pouring myself into a relationship that I had nothing left of myself. I was the woman who had been discarded, left behind like a piece of forgotten furniture. But as the months passed, I began to find myself again. I learned how to exist on my own terms. I moved into a small apartment, modest, but it was mine. I had my job as a nurse, a career I had worked so hard to build. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it gave me purpose. I didn't have much in terms of possessions, but what I did have was freedom. I started to focus on myself, on what made me feel alive again. I spent hours in the gym, worked on hobbies I had abandoned years ago, and began to rebuild my confidence. I surrounded myself with people who didn't judge me for my past, people who reminded me of my worth. But the loneliness often crept in, especially when I came home to an empty apartment at the end of a long shift. There were nights when the silence felt deafening. The memories of my former life with Julian still lingering in the corners of my mind. I had become used to his absence in our marriage, but now I was learning how to live without him altogether. It was during this time, 6 months after the divorce, that everything changed. I was sitting in my doctor's office, the sterile smell of antiseptic all around me, when I first heard the news. My doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled softly at me. "You're pregnant, Sophia," she said, her voice gentle but sure. At first, I couldn't process the words. I hadn't even considered the possibility. My body had always failed me when it came to pregnancy. I had convinced myself that motherhood wasn't in the cards for me. After everything, the heartbreak of losing Julian and the emotional toll of years of trying and failing to have a child. The idea of being pregnant seemed almost laughable, but here I was, pregnant, and not just with one child, but with 4. The shock hit me like a tidal wave. Quadruplets. The doctors ran additional tests to confirm, but there was no doubt. I was going to have 4 babies. My heart raced as I sat there, staring at the ultrasound pictures, my hands trembling. For a moment, I was paralyzed. I was terrified. The idea of raising 4 children on my own seemed impossible. How could I provide for them? How could I give them everything they deserved? But deep down, I knew this was a miracle. This was my second chance at everything I had wanted, everything Julian had told me I couldn't have. For the first time in months, I felt something stirring within me. Hope. Maybe this wasn't just a random twist of fate. Maybe these children were the universe's way of telling me that I could be a mother, after all. I decided then that I would keep the babies. I would raise them on my own, no matter the obstacles. But it wasn't just about raising them. It was about proving to myself and to Julian that I was more than the woman he had left behind. I would show him that I was enough, that my worth wasn't defined by his rejection. As the months passed, I prepared for the arrival of my babies. I bought cribs, clothes, and everything else I needed. But there was something else I had to prepare for, something I didn't expect. Julian. When the invitation to his baby shower arrived, I couldn't ignore it. I knew it was meant to hurt me, to mock me. But instead of being crushed by it, something inside me snapped. I realized that I had a chance to prove him wrong. To show him what he had lost, what he had walked away from. I didn't need to say a word. All I had to do was show up. I wasn't going to attend the baby shower as the broken woman he had discarded. I was going to attend as a mother, proud, strong, and ready to stand my ground. I would walk in there with my quadruplets in tow, and I would show Julian that he was wrong about me, about us. I would show him what he thought he would never have. As the day of the baby shower approached, I prepared myself for the emotional battle ahead. I had no idea how Julian would react. I had no idea how his family would respond. But I knew this much. I was ready. I was ready to face whatever came my way. For my children, for myself, for the woman I had become. And when the moment finally came, I would show Julian the truth. The moment I saw the envelope, I knew it would be something I wouldn't be able to ignore. It was thick, embossed with a gold trim, elegant and pristine, exactly the kind of invitation that Julian would send, the kind that screamed wealth and an almost too perfect image, the kind that I never quite fit into, no matter how hard I tried. But this one felt different. It wasn't just an invitation. It was a statement, a jab, a reminder of everything I'd lost and everything Julian had gained. The baby shower invitation was addressed to me, but the tone was anything but personal. It was cold, sterile, almost mocking in its formality. Mr. and Mrs. Julian Carter request the honor of your presence at a celebration for the expected arrival of their child, it read. There were no personal touches, no warmth, nothing that reflected any semblance of the life we had shared. The truth hit me hard. I had never been a part of Julian's world. I had been an outsider. But this felt like he was rubbing my face in it. He had his perfect life now, his perfect family with his perfect wife. And here I was, invited to witness it all from the outside, standing as nothing more than a footnote in his past. I could already feel the anger rising within me, threatening to overflow. But there was something else mixed in with it, something that surprised me. It was a sense of resolve. I hadn't thought about revenge until that moment. Julian had moved on, but that didn't mean I had to accept it. No, I wasn't going to fade into the background. I was going to show up, but I wouldn't be alone. I wasn't going to be the weak, discarded woman Julian had so easily walked away from. I was a mother now. I had something to prove, not just to him, but to myself. And this was my chance to do just that. When I had first met Julian, his family had seemed like the epitome of perfection. They were powerful, wealthy, and influential, everything I wasn't. I was the daughter of working-class parents who had died too soon, leaving me with no safety net, no legacy to claim. His family never let me forget that. Julian's mother, especially, had made it clear from the start that I didn't belong. She was sharp, cold, and unforgiving, with a penchant for subtle jabs. Whenever I made a mistake, she was the first to point it out. It wasn't just her dislike of me. It was her belief that I didn't deserve her son. I wasn't from the right background, didn't have the right connections, and certainly didn't measure up to her standard of perfection. And Julian? Over time, he began to mirror his family's views. They planted seeds of doubt in his mind about me, about my worth. Slowly, he started to see me through their eyes, not as the woman he had fallen in love with, but as someone who was always lacking. I wasn't rich enough, educated enough, or successful enough for his family. His father, a cold and distant man, barely acknowledged my presence at family gatherings. The only one who ever showed me kindness was Michelle, Julian's younger sister. She was different, genuine, kind-hearted, and untainted by the family's expectations. But even Michelle couldn't shield me from the bitterness that ran deep within Julian's family. Over time, I realized that no matter how much I tried to fit in, I would always be the outsider. After Julian and I separated, I stopped trying to seek their approval. But receiving the invitation to his baby shower made me realize how much of their disdain I had internalized. It was as if his family had won. He had everything they wanted for him, and I was left in the dust. But not anymore. I wasn't going to let them win this time. As I sat on the couch, staring at the invitation, my emotions wavered between rage and disbelief. Should I go? Was it worth the pain, the humiliation of showing up just to prove a point? It would be easy to ignore it, to let Julian and his family carry on with their perfect little lives. I could stay at home, far from their world, and continue rebuilding my life quietly. But that wasn't who I had become. No, I was no longer that woman who let people walk over her. I had spent far too many years trying to prove my worth to someone who didn't even care to see it. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my children, my quadruplets. The 4 miracles I had fought so hard for. They deserved a father who would see them, claim them, and love them. But more importantly, they deserved a mother who would stand up for them, who would show them that no one, no matter how powerful or wealthy, could take away their worth. Julian had left me when I was vulnerable, but now I was stronger. I had my children, my own self-respect, and the truth on my side. This was the moment for me to prove that I had never needed him. I had everything I needed right here, with me. I took a deep breath, running my fingers over the invitation one last time. I wasn't just going to show up. I was going to walk into that room with my head held high, my children in tow, and I was going to make Julian see the family he had never bothered to acknowledge. And I wouldn't be alone. I would have my quadruplets with me, a living, breathing testament to the love I had to offer and the life he had tried to destroy. As soon as the decision was made, I knew what had to come next. I wasn't just showing up as a woman seeking closure. I was showing up as a mother. And mothers don't just show up. They prepare. I had to make sure everything was perfect for the children. I wanted them to look as perfect as I knew they were. I went shopping for outfits for my babies. I wanted them to look special, to look like the miracles they were. Each one of them was so unique, yet they were bound together by a connection deeper than anything Julian could ever understand. I knew that when he saw them, it would hit him harder than anything I could say. I chose outfits carefully, nothing too extravagant, but something that would show that my children were important. I wanted them to feel as loved as they were, and I wanted Julian to understand the weight of the responsibility he had ignored for so long. The clothes I picked were simple but bright, colors that would make them stand out in a crowd, a sea of yellow, blue, and white, cheerful and loud, just like my babies. They were going to be the stars of that show. And I was going to be the one who made sure everyone remembered who we were. As I made the final preparations, I could feel a calm settling over me. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about showing the world that I was more than just a woman who had been cast aside. I was a mother, a protector, and no one, least of all Julian, could take that from me. The baby shower was approaching quickly, and I was ready to face the past, to confront Julian and to walk into that room with my head held high. The moment I had been preparing for was just around the corner, and I was ready to make my mark. The night before the baby shower, I stood in front of the mirror in my small, modest apartment, staring at my reflection. The woman who stared back at me seemed familiar, yet foreign. She wasn't the broken woman Julian had discarded. No, She was someone different, someone stronger, more confident, someone who had learned to survive and thrive in the aftermath of a shattered dream. I hadn't recognized it at first, but I had changed. The past year had forced me to confront every part of myself that I had ignored. I had spent so long trying to please Julian, trying to fit into a world that never truly accepted me. But now, I was different. I was a mother. And these 4 children, these little miracles, were my proof of strength. They were proof that I wasn't the failure Julian had claimed me to be. I wasn't the broken woman he had left behind. I had built a life, my life, without him. And in the process, I had found a strength I never knew I had. I ran my fingers over the dress I had carefully picked out for tomorrow. It was simple, elegant, nothing extravagant. But it made me feel beautiful. It wasn't about impressing anyone, especially not Julian. It was about standing tall, showing up as the woman I had become, the woman who had fought for her children, and who had finally found her place in the world. As I stood there, I thought about everything I had been through, every failed IVF treatment, every cruel word Julian had thrown at me, every tear I had shed alone in the silence of my apartment. But I wasn't there anymore. That woman was in the past. The woman who stood before me now was a survivor, a mother who would not be silenced. Tomorrow would be my moment. I wasn't just going to walk into that room with my quadruplets. I was going to walk in with the confidence of someone who knew her worth. I was going to walk in as the woman who had survived, who had overcome. And no one, especially not Julian, would be able to take that away from me. As I sat down on the couch, staring at the invitation again, the doorbell rang. I didn't need to check the peephole. I knew who it was. Michelle, my best friend. The one person who had been there for me when Julian and his family had made me feel like I wasn't enough. The one person who had never doubted me. Michelle had been with me through the darkest moments of my life, and now she was here, ready to support me through the most important moment of all. "Hey, girl," Michelle said as she walked in, her smile bright and comforting. She had a knack for making everything feel like it was going to be okay, even when I wasn't so sure. I looked at her and smiled, trying to mask the anxiety bubbling inside me. "Hey," I replied. I'm nervous about tomorrow." She walked over and sat beside me, resting her hand on mine. "I get it," she said softly. "This is a big step. But you've got this, Soph. You've been through so much already. Tomorrow? That's just another chapter in your story. And you're going to write it however you want." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. She was right. This wasn't just about the baby shower. It was about my journey, about everything I had overcome, and I wasn't going to let Julian or anyone else define my story. Michelle had always been the one to remind me of my strength. She had been my rock when I felt like everything was falling apart. And now, as I prepared to confront Julian, I realized how much I needed her. I needed someone who believed in me the way she always had. "You're right," I said, my voice a little steadier now. "I can't let this shake me. This is my moment. I'm doing this for my kids. For us." Michelle nodded, a proud smile on her face. "Exactly. You've already won. The fact that you're even here, about to show up and prove yourself, that's victory in itself. She wasn't wrong. I was showing up. And that alone was powerful." As the hours passed, I prepared myself in ways I hadn't expected. The physical preparation was easy, buying outfits, making sure the quadruplets had everything they needed. But the emotional preparation? That was the real challenge. I had spent so many years feeling inadequate, feeling like I was constantly fighting to prove myself. But now, I wasn't fighting for Julian's approval. I wasn't even fighting for anyone else's approval. I was fighting for me. I went over the details of the day in my head. The baby shower was going to be a spectacle. Julian's mansion, his friends, his family. the perfect life he had always wanted. And then there would be me. I was going to be the one who threw his perfect world off balance. But I wasn't doing it to hurt him. I wasn't trying to destroy him. I was just living my truth. And sometimes living your truth is the most powerful thing you can do. I spent the evening reflecting on how far I had come. Just a year ago, I had been devastated by Julian's departure. I had been consumed by anger and self-doubt, convinced that I wasn't enough. But look at me now. I was a mother, and my children were beautiful, brilliant little beings who needed me. They needed me to be strong. And I was. I had transformed. I had taken all the pain, all the heartbreak, and turned it into fuel for something better. I wasn't the same woman who had walked away from Julian's cold indifference. I had fought for my family, for my children, and I had found strength in the process. Tomorrow, I would stand before Julian and his perfect family, and I would show them what they had tried to erase. I wasn't just a woman he discarded. I was a mother with a story to tell, and that story was just beginning. As I sat in the living room, Michelle by my side, helping me sort through the final preparations for the baby shower, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't just the physical preparation that mattered. It was the emotional support Michelle provided. She had always been the one who had a way of helping me see things clearly when my emotions got the best of me. She helped me pick out the outfits for the quadruplets, simple but elegant, colors that would stand out without drawing too much attention. She knew me so well. She knew that I didn't want to appear desperate or overdone. This wasn't about showing off. It was about making sure Julian saw what he had lost. And Michelle got it. "You've got this," Michelle said as we finished the last few touches. "You're not just showing up for the fight. You're showing up to win. And you will." Her words were like a shield, and I knew that with her by my side, I could face whatever was coming. She had been with me through the worst, and now she was helping me face the man who had once shattered me. She wasn't just my best friend. She was my anchor. And with that, I knew I was ready. Julian's mansion was nothing short of magnificent. I had seen it only once before, on the day we moved in, when everything had still felt like a dream. The vast, sprawling estate sat on a quiet hill, its grandeur nearly blinding in its opulence. It had everything: a marble fountain, lush gardens, manicured lawns, and the kind of elegance that only wealth could afford. The grand doors opened into a cavernous hallway with high ceilings and chandeliers that glittered like diamonds. To anyone else, it was the epitome of success. To me, it was the cold monument to everything Julian had become. A symbol of the life he chose, and the life he left me behind for. As I approached the front gates with my children in tow, my heart pounded in my chest. The invitation had been clear. The baby shower was going to be nothing short of an event. I could already picture it: the perfectly dressed guests, the soft clink of glasses, the laughter echoing from the garden as Julian's friends and family gathered around to celebrate the new chapter in his life. And there I would be, walking through that door, not as the woman who once stood by his side, but as the one who would shatter his perfect image. I could feel the contrast between my life now and what awaited me inside. In the car, we drove through streets lined with luxury cars and sprawling estates. The world outside my window was polished, perfect, untouched. And then there was me. I wasn't rich. I wasn't from their world. I didn't belong here. But I wasn't here to fit in. I was here to make a statement. The house loomed in front of us, and I felt a sense of urgency flood through me. This wasn't just any party. This was the culmination of Julian's perfect life. But for me, it was the beginning of something new. I had come a long way, from the woman who had silently accepted rejection to the one who was now ready to stand up and confront the man who had thought he could erase her from his world. As I stepped out of the car, the weight of the moment hit me. I looked down at my quadruplets, who were sitting in their stroller, wide-eyed and curious, oblivious to the storm brewing. They were perfect. Each of them, a beautiful little miracle. "Are you ready, Mommy?" Michelle asked, her voice calm but filled with the kind of confidence I needed. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Ready as I'll ever be. I took their hands and began to walk toward the front door. The sound of my footsteps on the gravel was loud in my ears, as if the world was waiting for the moment I would step through that threshold. The tension was unbearable. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was ready. But I felt the eyes of the mansion on me as we approached. The guests, already gathered in the garden, would see me coming. And then, there it was. The door. The grand entrance. Julian's domain. I reached for the handle and pulled it open. The moment we stepped inside, the chatter of the guests faltered. All eyes turned toward us. And for a moment, there was nothing but silence. I stood there, holding the hands of my children, feeling the weight of every gaze. It was as if time had stopped. Every guest in the room seemed to freeze, their attention riveted on us. The beautiful gowns, the smiles, the laughter, they all seemed to fade into the background as I walked forward with my children. Across the room, I saw Julian. He was standing near the back, talking to a group of men, his smile frozen on his face. But when his eyes met mine, his expression shifted. It was like a flash of recognition, a moment of pure disbelief. His eyes widened, and his mouth opened slightly, as though he were trying to process the impossible. The first confirmation had hit him. His denial was about to be shattered in front of everyone he knew. Julian's face morphed from confusion to shock as his eyes scanned us. He took a step back, like he was seeing a ghost. His jaw clenched, and I could see the panic building behind his calm facade. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't prepared for me, for us. And he certainly wasn't prepared for the truth I was about to reveal. His eyes darted from me to my children. It was obvious he didn't know what to say. He looked at each of them, his face betraying the shock that was beginning to sink in. I knew what he was thinking. How could this be real? How could these children, his children, be standing in front of him? How could they be mine? He had denied them for so long, had convinced himself they didn't exist. And now, here they were. In full view, undeniable in their resemblance to him. The silence stretched for a moment too long. Guests around us whispered, exchanging looks of surprise. Julian took a step forward, his body rigid. His lips parted, but no words came. It was as if he was caught in a storm of confusion and disbelief, unable to make sense of what he was seeing. I took a deep breath and stood my ground. This wasn't about Julian. This was about me, about my children, and about showing the world that I would no longer be invisible. I wasn't here for his approval. I wasn't here for his family's approval. I was here to be seen. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my own presence. But the shock wasn't confined to Julian alone. As he stepped forward, trying to collect himself, his parents moved in from the side. They looked at me with the same disdain that had followed me throughout our marriage. Julian's mother, a woman of regal bearing, who had always looked down on me, pursed her lips, her eyes narrowing as they landed on my children. "Oh, Julian," she murmured under her breath, her voice dripping with disapproval. "What is this?" She barely spared a glance at me before turning her gaze back to Julian, a look of contempt on her face. She had never liked me, never thought I was good enough for her precious son. And now, seeing the children she never thought existed, I could see the disdain in her eyes. Her disappointment was almost palpable. But Julian's father, a stern man with the same cold, calculating demeanor as Julian, said nothing at first. He just stared, his eyes flicking between me and my children. And I could see the silent judgment in his gaze. The tension in the room was thick. Guests shifted uneasily, unsure of what to say. Some were glancing at Julian, some at me, But all of them were clearly uncomfortable. They didn't know how to react. They didn't know how to reconcile the version of Julian they had known with the truth standing in front of them. And I couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction at their discomfort. This was the moment Julian had been avoiding, the moment when the lies would be exposed. He could no longer pretend. He could no longer deny what was standing right in front of him. The room was still frozen as I stood in the center, holding my quadruplets close. The sharp, uncomfortable silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the usual light-hearted chatter of a baby shower. I could feel every eye on me, some full of surprise, others full of judgment, but none more than Julian's. I could see the struggle in his eyes, the confusion, the disbelief. He opened his mouth as though to speak, but quickly closed it, unsure of how to process what was unfolding before him. Then, he took a hesitant step toward me. His posture was stiff, his face pale. His mouth moved again, but this time, words came out, words I was prepared for, but they still stung. "This isn't possible," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. His gaze flicked from one child to the next, as though searching for some way to explain away the impossible. You're lying, Sophia. These kids aren't mine. This is some kind of trick." His words hit like a slap, but they didn't faze me. I stood taller, my posture firm. This wasn't the first time Julian had denied me. This wasn't the first time he had called me a liar. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't going to cower, not for him, and certainly not in front of these 4 perfect children. "Julian," I said, my voice steady despite the rising anger, "you can deny them all you want, but the truth is undeniable. I'm not here to fight with you. I'm here to show you the truth you've refused to see." A few guests shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. I knew they were waiting for Julian's next move, expecting him to find some way to control the situation, to spin his version of events. But this time, he had no control. "I'm not lying," I continued, my voice stronger now, bolder. "These are your children, and I've got the proof to show you." I reached into the bag at my side, pulling out the small stack of documents that had changed everything. The DNA test results, the medical records, the evidence that no amount of denial could erase. I handed them to Julian, watching his hands tremble slightly as he took them. His eyes flicked over the papers quickly, but I knew the truth was sinking in. "No," Julian said, his voice cracking for the first time. "No, this can't be right." But the evidence didn't lie. The paternity test didn't lie. And I was done being his victim, done hiding behind the walls of his lies. I wasn't here to beg him for recognition. I wasn't here to seek his approval. I was here because my children deserved to know the truth, and Julian was going to face it, whether he liked it or not. The murmurs began slowly, soft whispers that escalated as Julian continued to flip through the papers, his eyes widening with each line he read. The guests at the baby shower were now fully aware of the gravity of the situation. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with disbelief. A few exchanged nervous glances, unsure of how to react to the unfolding drama. "Are you sure?" one of the women from the party asked, her voice shaking slightly. She wasn't speaking to me, but to Julian. "Is this true?" Julian was standing frozen, the papers still clutched in his hands as he looked between the DNA test results and the children. He looked at each one of them, his children, his face a study in disbelief. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, trying to come up with a story, a way to deny it all. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His tongue darted over his lips as though he was searching for the right words, but none came. Instead, he turned to his guests, his friends and family, trying to salvage what little control he had left over the situation. "They're lying," he said, his voice cracking under the weight of the truth. "This is all some kind of scheme." But no one was buying it. The silence in the room deepened. Julian's family, his own parents, didn't speak up to defend him. His mother's face was hard, her lips pressed into a thin line, but there was no denying the truth she could see in front of her. Julian's father stood back, arms crossed, his eyes narrowed. Neither of them intervened. They both seemed to understand. This wasn't something they could fix. I could feel the tension building as the room shifted from one of awkward silence to barely contained discomfort. Some of the guests now openly stared at Julian, no longer sure who to believe. The person they had once seen as the perfect man, successful, composed, wealthy, was now unraveling before them. But I wasn't done. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, but instead of letting it overwhelm me, I used it to fuel my resolve. This wasn't just about exposing Julian. It was about standing up for myself, for my children. And no one, not even Julian, could take that from me. I looked Julian dead in the eyes, refusing to let him see the fear he'd instilled in me all those years ago. "You've made your bed, Julian," I said, my voice steady. "But you can't keep lying your way out of it. These are your children. They always have been. And no amount of denial is going to change that." The guests were still looking at us, some quietly nodding in agreement with me. Julian's face was flushed with embarrassment, his calm, controlled demeanor shattered. For the first time, I could see the cracks in his facade. The man who had always prided himself on control, on perfection, was now visibly shaken. His meltdown had begun, and there was no stopping it. "You have no idea what you've done," Julian muttered, his voice now tinged with anger. "You've ruined my life." The words stung, but they didn't break me. He was projecting, blaming me for something that was his responsibility. I didn't flinch. I stood tall, knowing that I had done what needed to be done for my children. "You don't get to blame me for your failures," I said, my voice unwavering. "You had a choice. You made that choice, and you walked away." Julian's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His chest rose and fell as he tried to steady himself, but his control was slipping further and further. His perfect world, the one he had built on lies, was crumbling before him. He opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, a sharp voice interrupted him. "You're making a scene, Julian," his mother said, her voice cold. She stepped forward, trying to maintain some semblance of order. "This isn't the time or place for this." But Julian didn't listen. His face was twisted with anger now, his entire body rigid as he took a step toward me. "You've destroyed everything," he shouted. "You've ruined my life, Sophia." And just like that, the last of his perfect image shattered. His anger, his denial, his broken mask. It all came pouring out, his calm exterior completely gone. And in that moment, I realized that Julian had already lost. He had lost his control, his dignity, and the world he had tried so hard to create. And I had won. The aftermath of the confrontation was immediate, like a wave crashing down on everything Julian had worked so hard to build. The room, once filled with hushed whispers and disbelief, now buzzed with confusion and uncertainty. The guests, still reeling from the bombshell I had dropped, didn't know what to do or say. Some stood in silence, unsure of how to react. Others exchanged nervous glances, some even sneaking glances at Julian, waiting for him to say something, anything, to make sense of the chaos I had just caused. But Julian said nothing. He stood frozen, clutching the DNA test results like they were a lifeline he couldn't hold on to. The denial was still there, lurking in the corners of his mind, but it was slipping away with every passing second. The truth was undeniable, and he knew it. But instead of confronting it, he did what he always did. He tried to control the narrative. Within minutes, Julian was speaking again. But it wasn't the calm, collected Julian I had known. No, this time, his words were frantic, desperate. He turned to his family first, his mother, his father, even his younger sister Michelle, who stood at the back, her arms crossed in silent judgment. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, his voice shaky but forceful, as though he could convince everyone that this was just some misunderstanding. "I don't know what she's trying to do, but these children are not mine. This is some kind of scheme, a trick." I could see the cracks in his facade. His eyes darted to the guests, searching for someone to support him, someone to back him up. But there was no one. His parents said nothing, their expressions unreadable. But their silence spoke volumes. Michelle, however, stepped forward, her face a mixture of concern and disbelief. "Julian," Michelle started, her voice hesitant. "You know this isn't a scheme. You know these children are yours." He shook his head violently, cutting her off before she could finish. "No, this isn't happening. She's lying. She has to be." I watched as Julian tried to salvage the situation, desperately holding on to his narrative. But the truth was like a boulder rolling downhill, unstoppable. I had exposed him for what he was, a man who ran from responsibility, who had abandoned me when I needed him most. And now, that reality was staring him in the face. As the chaos swirled around me, I found myself in a strange moment of clarity. It wasn't about proving Julian wrong anymore. It wasn't even about making him feel the sting of betrayal or humiliating him in front of everyone he cared about. It was about me, about what I had learned through all of this. I had fought for my children. I had fought for my dignity. And now, for the first time in a long time, I was standing in my truth. I glanced down at my quadruplets, who were still holding my hands, completely oblivious to the storm unfolding around them. They were the reason I had fought so hard. They were the reason I had walked into that room, defying every expectation, every fear. They deserved to know the truth about their father, even if Julian wasn't ready to accept it. As I stood there, I couldn't help but think back to the woman I had been just a year ago, the woman who had been discarded, abandoned, and left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. Back then, I had believed that my worth was tied to Julian's approval, that I needed him to validate my existence. But now I knew that my worth came from within. I was a mother, and nothing could change that. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to stand alone. I wasn't afraid to show the world who I was. The woman who had been broken, beaten down, was gone. And in her place stood a mother who had learned how to rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever. Through the chaos, I noticed Brooke standing near the edge of the garden, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She had been quiet throughout the whole ordeal, watching from the sidelines, her expression tight with discomfort. As Julian's meltdown continued, I could see her eyes flicking between him and me, her face a mixture of anger and confusion. I wasn't sure what I expected from her. When Julian and I had first separated, Brooke had been the woman who seemed to have everything Julian had wanted. She was younger, more vibrant, and to Julian, she represented everything I couldn't give him. But now, standing there with her arms folded, she didn't look like the confident woman I had once imagined. She looked unsure. Julian's outburst echoed through the room, and that was when Brooke stepped forward. Her voice was quiet at first, but I could hear the underlying tension. "Julian, stop. Just stop." She reached out to touch his arm, but he shrugged her off, his fury too great for him to acknowledge anything other than his own pain. I saw it then, the doubt in her eyes, the cracks in their relationship. She had been standing by him, supporting him through the years. But I could tell now that things weren't as perfect as she had once believed. She was trying to hold on to a man who had already lost himself, and she was starting to realize it. her face twisted with frustration as she glanced at me, then back at Julian. I don't know what to say." She seemed lost for words, caught between the man she had married and the truth that was now undeniable. I wasn't here for her. I wasn't here to mend the rift between Julian and Brooke, but I couldn't help but feel a small flicker of satisfaction as I watched her struggle with the truth. It wasn't just Julian who had been living a lie. Brooke had been living it too, and now she had no choice but to face the reality that her perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. Through the turmoil, Michelle never left my side. She was standing behind me, a quiet strength, her presence grounding me in a way that nothing else could. While the world around us spun out of control, she remained steady, offering silent support when words failed. "You did it," Michelle said softly, her voice filled with pride. "You showed him. You showed them all." I smiled faintly, my eyes still on Julian, who was now pacing angrily, trying to gather his thoughts. "I didn't do it for them, Michelle," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I did it for us, for my children. They deserve to know who they are, no matter how hard Julian tries to deny them." Michelle nodded, understanding the depth of what I was saying. "You've done more than anyone could ever expect. You're not just standing up for them. You're standing up for yourself, for the woman you've become." Her words hit me harder than I expected. She was right. This wasn't just about Julian anymore. It wasn't just about getting back at him. It was about reclaiming my life, my future, and the future of my children. It was about showing them that no matter how much the world tried to break me, I would never stop standing. As the night stretched on and the tension in the room began to simmer, I realized that the battle was far from over. But tonight, I had won. And no matter what Julian or his family did, nothing would ever take away the victory I had earned. The aftermath of the baby shower confrontation didn't end with just a few awkward glances and uncomfortable silences. No, Julian wasn't the type to back down quietly. And I knew deep down that the war wasn't over. As the days went by, I could feel the storm building on the horizon. Julian wasn't just going to let his perfect world fall apart without a fight. It started with a call, one I had expected but still couldn't prepare for. Julian's lawyer. I recognized the number instantly. A deep breath, then I answered. "Sophia!" The lawyer's voice crackled through the phone, smooth and cold. "We need to discuss your children." I had never met him in person, but I had heard about him. A high-powered lawyer known for winning the impossible cases. This wasn't going to be easy. "They're not just mine," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "They're Julian's too. You're wasting your time." He chuckled, the sound low and condescending. "You don't know the first thing about what you're up against. Julian wants to ensure that these children are properly taken care of. The situation has gotten out of hand, Sophia. We are filing for full custody." A cold wave washed over me, but I refused to let it show. Custody? He wanted to take them from me? The thought of it made my blood boil. "Good luck with that," I said, my voice firm. "I'll see you in court." I ended the call before he could respond, and in that moment, everything became clear. Julian had gone from denial to desperation. He wanted to control the situation, but I wouldn't let him. The children were mine, and I would fight for them with everything I had. In the days that followed, the reality of the legal battle began to settle in. Julian wasn't just throwing accusations around. He was building a case, and he had the resources to do it. His lawyer's office was nothing short of a fortress, walls lined with expensive artwork, a cold, impersonal reception area, and a team of paralegals who worked tirelessly to draft the paperwork. They accused me of using the children for financial gain, claiming I had been unfit for parenthood during my marriage to Julian, and alleging that I was trying to ruin his new life with Brooke. It felt like an avalanche of paperwork, demands, and false accusations. But I wasn't backing down. I knew the truth, and I knew the strength of my bond with my children. I hired a lawyer of my own, a woman who specialized in family law. Jenna wasn't the kind of lawyer who wore a power suit or spoke in corporate jargon. She was real, grounded, and, most importantly, she believed in my case. "I know it's hard, Sophia," Jenna said as we sat in her office, papers spread out in front of us. "But you're not just fighting for custody. You're fighting for your dignity, for your children's futures. This isn't just a battle for a title. It's a battle for your right to exist as a family." Her words struck a chord with me. This wasn't just about Julian trying to take my children from me. It was about proving that I had every right to be their mother. I had been through hell to get to this point, and I wasn't going to let anyone erase the family I had created. But the legal challenges were just beginning. I had to prepare for the long, grueling battle ahead. Every day seemed like a new mountain to climb, each document I signed feeling like one more nail in the coffin of Julian's perfect life. But I would fight. I would not let him win. As the legal battle heated up, something unexpected happened. The public began to take notice. The story of Julian's secret children, the ones he had denied and abandoned, began to spread. News outlets picked up the story, and soon everyone seemed to be talking about it. I wasn't prepared for the flood of attention. But there was one thing I hadn't anticipated: support. For years I had felt invisible. For years I had believed that I was nothing without Julian. But now, as the public began to hear my side of the story, I started to feel something shift. People started reaching out to me. Women, mothers, people who had been through their own battles. They saw me as a symbol of strength, of resilience, and they rallied behind me. I started to receive messages from strangers who had followed the case in the media. Some messages were simple, just words of encouragement. Others were more personal. One woman, in particular, stood out to me. She wrote, "I don't know you, but I've been through what you're going through. You're not alone. Keep fighting for your babies." Those words gave me strength I didn't know I had. It was as if I had finally found my place in the world. I wasn't alone anymore. There were people out there who understood, who supported me, and that made all the difference. But even as I gained strength from the public's support, Julian's attacks only intensified. His lawyer's team began digging deeper into my past, trying to find anything they could use against me. They called into question my ability to care for my children, my financial situation, and even my mental health. They thought they could break me. They thought they could wear me down. But what they didn't realize was that I had already been broken, and I had rebuilt myself. Piece by piece, I wasn't going to let them tear me down again. As the case dragged on, Julian's attacks became more personal. His legal team filed multiple motions, demanding custody of the children. They tried to make me out to be an unfit mother, claiming that I was unstable and that I couldn't provide the life Julian's wealth could. It felt like a cruel joke. After everything I had been through, after everything Julian had put me through, he was now accusing me of not being good enough to care for our children? But I didn't flinch. Every day, I spent hours preparing for court, meeting with my lawyer, reviewing evidence, and finding strength in the support of my friends and family. The courtroom became a battlefield, and I wasn't going to let Julian, or anyone else, take my children from me. I looked at the photos of my quadruplets. Their faces so innocent, so full of hope. They were my motivation. I fought for them, and I would continue to fight, no matter what it took. The media attention was relentless. Every time I walked out of the courtroom, cameras flashed, reporters crowded around, and the questions came fast. Some asked about the custody battle, others about my personal life. But one question stood out more than the rest. Do you think Julian will ever accept these children as his own? I never hesitated. He doesn't have to. They're mine, and I will fight for them. The courtroom was eerily silent as the final hearing began. I sat in my seat, the weight of the last several months pressing down on me. My fingers were tightly clasped in my lap, my mind racing through every detail of the case, every document, every piece of evidence. This was the moment that would define everything, the moment I had been fighting for since the day Julian walked out of my life. Julian sat across from me, his usual calm demeanor now replaced with a look of desperation. His lawyer sat beside him, flipping through papers, occasionally glancing up at me with a cold, calculating gaze. On the other side of the room, my lawyer, Jenna, was ready. She was strong, unwavering, and had spent countless hours preparing for this day. Together, we were ready to face whatever Julian threw at us. The judge, a seasoned woman with a no-nonsense attitude, called the proceedings to order. Her gavel hit the bench with a sharp bang, signaling that the battle was about to reach its climax. She turned to us, her eyes scanning the room before speaking. "I've reviewed the evidence, listened to both sides, and considered the testimonies. This is a complex case, but it is clear to me that the interests of the children are paramount. This court will now proceed with the final decision." My heart raced in my chest as the judge's words settled in. This was it, the culmination of everything I had fought for. I wasn't just fighting for custody. I was fighting for my children's future. I was fighting for our right to live, free from Julian's control and manipulation. As the hearing progressed, I felt a sense of calm I hadn't expected. It was as though everything that had happened, every failure, every heartache, had led me to this moment. It had all been worth it. Every tear I had shed, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt, it had led to this. I thought about the woman I had been before all of this, the woman who had clung to Julian, convinced that I needed his approval to feel whole, the woman who had believed that my worth was tied to his love. But that woman was gone now. In her place stood a woman who had found her own strength, her own voice. I wasn't defined by Julian anymore. I was defined by the love I had for my children, by the strength I had discovered in myself. Throughout the case, I had held my head high. I had presented myself with dignity, knowing that the truth was on my side. And now, as I sat in that courtroom, I felt a quiet sense of pride. I wasn't just fighting for the right to be their mother. I was fighting to show my children that no matter how hard life tried to break us, we would always rise. I was showing them that no one could take away our family. Not Julian. Not anyone. I glanced over at my quadruplets, who were sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom with Michelle. They were my everything, my reason for being. And I knew that no matter what happened in that courtroom, I had already won. I had already proven that my worth was never tied to anyone's approval. I was enough. And so were they. The room was tense as the judge deliberated. Time seemed to stretch on forever, but in that moment, I wasn't afraid. I had spent so much of my life being afraid of Julian, afraid of not being good enough, of not measuring up. But now, I stood on the other side of that fear. I had fought for my family, for my children, and I knew that the decision I had made to stand up for us was the right one. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge returned to the bench. She looked at both sides of the room, her expression stern. "I have reached a decision," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Sophia Hartley will retain full custody of the children. Julian Carter will be ordered to pay child support and will have supervised visitation rights. This decision is made with the children's best interests in mind, and I believe that their future lies in their mother's care." The words hit me like a wave. I wasn't sure at first if I had heard her correctly, but then the reality set in. I had won. My children were mine. I had proven myself as their mother, and no one, least of all Julian, could take them from me. I felt the tears sting my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, tears of triumph. The fight had been long, and it had been hard. but we had made it. As I walked out of the courtroom with my children and Michelle by my side, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Free from the man who had tried to control my life, free from the fear that had haunted me for so many years. I had fought for my family, and now I had the future I had always dreamed of. I had come so far from the woman who had been rejected, discarded, and left to pick up the pieces of a broken life. I had rebuilt myself, piece by piece, until I was strong enough to face whatever challenges life threw my way. And now, with my children by my side, I was ready to face the future with hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be struggles. There would be challenges. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer afraid. I was no longer the woman who let fear control her life. I was a mother, and nothing, no one, could take that away from me. As the weeks passed, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm. The media attention died down, and the legal battles with Julian, though ongoing, were no longer as overwhelming. I had won the most important fight, custody of my children. And that victory, that assurance, was worth more than anything else. But I wasn't done yet. I still had a lot of healing to do. There were still scars left from my years with Julian, from the way he had treated me, the way he had discarded me when I was no longer useful to him. But those scars no longer defined me. I was defining myself now, every day. And my children were growing up in a home where love and strength ruled, not fear and doubt. I thought about the future, about the family we were building, about the lessons I would teach my children. I would teach them that no one could take away their worth, that they were enough no matter what anyone else said. That family wasn't just about blood. It was about love, about loyalty, about standing by each other no matter what. And as I looked at my children, I knew that this was just the beginning. The future was wide open, full of possibilities, full of promise. We had been through hell together, but we had come out stronger on the other side. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them as a family, together. I stood on the balcony of my apartment that evening, watching the sun set over the city. The air was calm, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. The weight of the past had lifted, and I could finally breathe. I thought about Julian, about everything he had put me through, about the way he had tried to break me. And I smiled, not because I hated him, but because I realized that I no longer needed him. I had everything I needed right here, my children, my strength, and my future. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need anyone's approval. I was enough. And so were my children. We were going to be okay.